Shabbat Shalom, and this is 10 Minutes of Torah. Not 9 days of Hanukkah, because as we all know, there are only 8. And not 10 days of Christmas, because as we all know, it's not our holiday. But what is ours is 10 minutes of Torah. Well, the Torah portion this week is Vayishlach, and it transitions over from being centered around Jacob, although Jacob certainly remains in the picture in different ways. But it goes from Jacob to his sons. And so even though it begins by saying Jacob settled in the land which his father Isaac had been living, the land of Canaan, as it's called then, immediately it goes right into talking about Joseph. Now, Joseph and his brothers and that whole story, that's going to take us all the way to the end of the book of Breshit, of Genesis. So what happens? First of all, Joseph receives this beautiful coat, the coat of many colors. I think children always want to say, oh, I am my parents' favorite. And parents, of course, never want to say that any child is their favorite, even if they may have a favorite. Each family has its own dynamics. But in this case, Jacob is explicit. Joseph is his favorite, and he gives him this beautiful coat. And Joseph then has 2 dreams. In the first dream, he sees that the sheaves of his brothers, sheaves of wheat, are bowing down to his. And in the second, the sun and the moon and 11 stars were all bowing down to him. And he tells, of course, his brothers about these dreams. And, doesn't take a genius to figure out what's going on. Those are Joseph's parents and brothers. And they are all kind of recognizing him as a ruler. It's interesting, though, because this will actually occur later on in Genesis. But we'll get there in a few parshiot. Well, one day Joseph goes to meet his brothers in the field, and when he arrives, they plot to kill him. But Judah, who is perhaps the most important of the brothers, Judah convinces everyone to sell Joseph instead. And a caravan of nomads is passing by. It's interesting, the text isn't clear if they're Ishmaelites or Midianites. It's not important, because what happens regardless is Joseph is sold to this caravan and taken down to Egypt. At this point in the Parsha, the story is interrupted by Judah and Tamar. I'm going to tell you about that Judah, the same Judah who saved Joseph from being killed. A separate story about Judah and Tamar. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Once, though, the story of Judah and Tamar has been told, the Torah then returns to the story of Joseph, and he is brought down to Egypt, and he is bought by a very wealthy man named Potiphar. Well, Joseph seems to have a natural charismatic ability, and he is appointed the chief of the servants. Potiphar's wife takes a liking to Joseph, sends everybody out of the house one day except for Joseph, and tries to seduce him. And at the last minute, Joseph has the strength of character not to, and she complains to her husband, saying that Joseph actually had come to her and tried to take advantage of her. Joseph is thrown in jail. Well, once again, in jail, he becomes the chief of the prisoners. And while he's in jail, in the dungeon, really, jail is not strong enough of a word. While he's in the dungeon, the butler and the baker have 2 dreams. And the butler's dream, according to Joseph, means that he's going to be restored to his former place of honor. The baker, he says, unfortunately, within a few days, you will be no longer alive. Well, he's right on both accounts. And they and the butler who returns to Pharaoh has told Joseph, I'll remember you when I get there. And the butler, although restored to his position, has forgotten about Joseph. Okay, so there's a very lot going on in the Torah portion this week, as has been true, I think, over the last few weeks. But I want to talk about that passage, the interruption, chapter 38 of Genesis. We call it the story of Judah and Tamar. And Judah, same Judah, as I said, who will become, of course, the head of the tribe, of the main tribe of the southern part of the people of Israel, Jerusalem the capital, Judah, from whom kings will come, like King David. So Judah has 3 sons. And one of the sons marries this woman named Tamar. I like the story because my daughter's name is Tamar, so I favor that name. But it's an interesting story regardless if you don't have a daughter named Tamar. Well, in the meantime, without quite specifying what it is, her husband, that is Judah's son, dies. And of course, the law was in those days that if somebody died and they were childless, if a male died and he was childless, the whole different complications with women. But if a male died who was childless, his brother would marry his wife, and that first child would be the inheritor of the person who died. So there was a purpose there. So Judah, having his first son died, has his second son marry Tamar, and he also dies. He has a third son, and he says to Tamar, wait until my third son becomes an adult, and then we'll marry him. But the truth is he had no intention of marrying him off because he's already had 2 sons who have been married to Tamar, and they both died. He had no intention whatsoever. Tamar realizes this. And so she dresses up. This is a really interesting thing, how Judah can't guess who this is, but she dresses up as a prostitute. And Judah, out in the field, he goes and uses her services. She gets pregnant from her father-in-law. Lots of interesting questions and things to deal with that, but that's not what I want to talk about today. When Jacob realizes that she is pregnant, he wants to punish her because he thinks that she has become pregnant. And she should have married his third son. She never did that, but she's become pregnant. As a matter of fact, what they say is she's played the harlot. That's how the text tells us. So what does she do? Well, she comes out and says, I am indeed pregnant. And the person who made me pregnant, and she pulls out a staff, right, and a ring, and says, whoever made me pregnant, this staff and this ring and a cord belong to that person. Now, those were identifiable marks in those days. That's how you knew, people would make a stamp like, from an envelope or something of that nature. And Judah indeed recognizes that they belong to him, that he is the father. And what is more important than any of that is that the Torah tells us, Judah says she is, here's the quote exactly, when he realizes that she would not embarrass him, and she actually was in danger with her life, he says, she is more righteous than I, because I did not give her my third son. And that is the end of the story, except that it's interesting that Tamar has twins. And these twins, very similar to Jacob and Esau, are fighting in the womb. And ultimately, the descendants of one of those twins, parrots, will become King David. Now, what is the Torah telling us? I think the message here is that someone's dignity is so important that you do whatever you can to keep that dignity. And if you do that, the Torah says that's a wonderful thing to do. There's a reward. I mean, not everyone gets an exact word, but it's a thing to say. It tells us that that her actions were truly righteous, and she is rewarded by becoming ultimately the person who begins the process to get to King David. Well, this has been 10 Minutes of Torah. Not 9 days of Hanukkah. That would be nice to have an extra one, but it ain't happening. Not 10 days of Christmas, but all of our Christian friends, Merry Christmas. 10 Minutes of Torah. Shabbat Shalom.